Okay, good evening and welcome to the October 13th, 2021 meeting of the East Lansing Planning Commission. Mr. Menzer, would you please call roll?
Thank you. Member Cahill.
Here.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Commissioner Boyle.
Here.
Commissioner Wolf.
Here.
Commissioner Lapine.
Here.
Commissioner Wagner.
Here.
Commissioner Bowman.
Here.
Commissioner Hendricks.
We have a quorum. Thank you. That'll move us on to item 1.2, approval of the agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda in front of us.
Move to approve the agenda.
Thank you. And I'll just go to this side. That's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Commissioner Sullivan. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, so all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed? That motion carries. Bringing us on to item 1.3, the draft minutes of the July 28th, 2021 meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes as presented. Thank you. That's been moved by Commissioner Cahill and seconded by Commissioner Lapine. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing no hands, then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed? That motion carries. And then finally, the joint meeting between the Planning Commission and the Housing Commission that took place on September 22nd, 2021. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes as well.
So moved.
Thank you. That's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Commissioner Sullivan. Thank you very much. Are there any discussion on that motion? I'm seeing no hands, and so I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed? That motion carries as well. I'd like to just offer, just by way of housekeeping this evening, please, if I'm not looking at you and you need to say something, sort of break from typical parliamentary procedure, and just give me a quick shout. I'll try to cover both sides of the room as best I can. And that, at least initially, our audio-visual team has asked that you identify yourselves so that they can redirect cameras as necessary until they get our names down. I do not believe we have any committee reports. We have committee business a little bit further on under old business. Is there a staff report tonight, Mr. Menzer?
There's not.
Thank you. And do any commissioners have any announcements? Item 4. And I see no hands, and so that'll move us on to item 5, communications from citizens. This is the time in our meeting when we invite attendees to come forward and discuss any matters that may or may not be on our agenda. We don't have the formal cards as we might normally, so I'll simply ask that you raise your hand. I also understand that we may have some attendees via Zoom, and so after our in-person attendees have had an opportunity to address the commission, we'll ask whether indeed there are any people that are attending remotely and ask them to join us as well. Ms. Cannon, would you like to come up and you can begin?
Am I getting close?
You're right there. That's just a little post. Just keep, there you go.
My name is
Come
Janelle
over,
Cannon.
Janelle, could you just come over a little bit to your left, maybe 2 feet. The mic was there. There. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Janelle Cannon, and I have the privilege of also serving on the Housing Commission. But earlier, I served on the Age-Friendly Communities Certification Project. And one of the items we were focusing on, of course, were affordable, accessible, and environmentally sustainable housing. And with our recent survey that came out in our joint meeting, I've been thinking about this a lot. And my big idea is, if the property at Evergreen, I know there's an extension on that, but if that doesn't go through, what about if the city would come up with a public-private partnership or a PUD or some sort of financial tool where we could design a village of small cottages, small townhouses, small condos, maybe even some tiny houses. This movement is has breadth and depth, and it's very popular among people who are young and old. And I believe that if we utilize the ingenuity, the enthusiasm, creativity, and skill of our university and its engineering staff and local architects, Chairman Bowman, you probably know somebody.
I might.
We could design a village that's walkable on that property, close to downtown, where it could feature artisans who could work and live right there on the property. It could have a community, a multipurpose community building. I know Helping Hands needs a new place, and it could maybe be located there, and you could have child daycare. There could be a space for larger artisans like sculptors. And the beauty about the small home movement is that it's affordable. And I just saw an article on my news feed today about a contractor in South Carolina called Eclipse, and he's building tiny cottage villages. And they're about $100,000, but for $1,000 you can move into this fully equipped and furnished tiny cottage. It may not be for everyone, but I think it's for many people. And some of his designs even have lofts that have a half bath in it. And these are all like 400 square feet. And if we ask someone to design a village that uses universal principle of design, it could be accessible when needed and easily adapted to the grandma who had to have a hip replacement, or the dad with a walker or a stroller. There are families living in these designed communities. I'm so impressed with what's going on with the interiors and the materials that are being used. And I hope that we can give serious consideration, if not that property, then another identified area in the city. Currently, I know that what's being proposed there is something called the Citadel. I'm not sure what that is or how that sort of fits with our East Lansing personality. I know in my mind it conjures up Great Santini zooming in overhead, and I don't know how that fits with the artist and exciting environment that we want to promote here downtown. And I also hope that we pursue accessory dwelling units. You know, in the Amish community, they call it a Dottie house. Mommy and Dottie are the words for Grandma and Grandpa in Pennsylvania Dutch. And when you're done with the big house, you move into the Dottie house. And many of us need those kinds of options for our family members. They don't need a nursing home. They don't have assets to move into these retirement resorts that are being built, which are very expensive, and what money you have that you hope to leave to your loved ones will not go to them. It's spent in these huge retirement communities. So I hope that that is pursued. I understand that it'll take zoning changes. But I think that if we get together and plan this village and work with the developer who understands what we're after, instead of waiting for a developer to tell us what they think would fit on that property, I think we'd all be happy, and we could really take a stand and make a mark for affordable housing here in East Lansing. And that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you hold on for just a second, just if there are any questions for Ms. Cannon? All right, no, thank you. Is there anybody else that's present here this evening that would like to come forward and make comments to the Planning Commission? I'm seeing no hands or any eager faces, and so Ms. Urdalis, would you check our online feed and see if there's anybody waiting remotely?
We have no attendees.
Okay, thank you. Then that will end communications from citizens. And we do not have public hearings this evening, so that'll move us on to our single item of old business, the Shaping the Avenue report. I'm not sure, is this Ms. Schmidt or Mr. Menzer? Please, Ms. Schmidt?
Good evening. It's wonderful to see you all tonight.
Absolutely.
Shaping the Avenue, as you know, was envisioned by the 2018 master plan. The Planning Commission has worked multiple years on this plan, making sure that it mirrors the goals and objectives of the 2018 master plan. The 2021 August draft that you have in front of you is an effort that the Planning Commission put forward. It includes numerous years and hours of public input from the community, and that is reflected in the document as well. This document is at a point now where the Planning Commission has to vote to determine whether they would like to move it forward to the City Council for their consideration of how they'll use the document going forward. Knowing that any consideration that the City Council makes will allow the Planning Commission opportunity to refine their efforts further by ongoing public input. But before you do that, I would be happy to answer any questions or comments that you may have.
Thanks, Ms. Schmidt. Questions for Ms. Schmidt?
Dorothy, just a quick question. What is the timeline, do you
This is
think?
Commissioner Wagner.
Oh, sorry. Wagner.
Thank you.
What is the timeline for council to review this, and do you have an end goal?
That's a good question. I think there's going to be a lot of combined discussion with the housing study that you've just had input on with this document and how they can be used to further the housing study goals and objectives. It could come forward in many formats. There's obviously been a lot of work done on this document, and it has a lot of good components that, like I said, have been through numerous hours of public input and numerous hours of the Planning Commission refining the components of the document. So if it's not turned into an ordinance to use as the document is drafted, it's definitely going to be used in some way, shape, or form. So it depends on what the planning or the City Council decides they want to direct staff to do further. Like I said, any option that we do, it will come back to the Planning Commission for consideration and further input and the public input. So I have a feeling with the housing study, it's going to come back in some different shape or form, but most of the components will be intact at the finished document.
Great, thank you.
And just sort of a follow-up to that, and appreciating that you don't know exactly how this is likely to be handled by council, I'll ask it. Do you think it's their intention that this is going to sort of make the rounds in public again, or continued rounds into to the public as some sort of public presentations?
As a full document?
Yes.
I'm not sure how they're going to want to do that. We're probably going to make recommendations, and I think you tonight could make that recommendation as part of your vote. That would be a great idea, and then staff will wait to get direction from City Council.
Thanks. Other questions for Ms. Schmidt? I've got one more. I took a look at reviewed your September 9th note or memo again, and I'm focusing specifically on the topics that need council direction. I know we've talked about this repeatedly, and some of the things are probably, well, they're going to be reviewed by council ultimately, I think. I'm wondering if it's your thought that, I wonder if you think it would be helpful to provide some direction to them, in as much as we're asking, some of the questions are a little bit beyond what the Planning Commission would typically do, but I'm wondering if you think that at least some direction, or by saying
Absolutely.
that, do you expect that that they'll ask one or maybe the committee to attend the meeting or meetings at which they review this and try to get some feedback then.
I would expect that they would probably want someone, or at least the chair, vice chair at the meeting, if they have any questions specifically about your recommendations. But anything that you would want city council to focus on with your vote and recommendation would be good to add it to that recommendation. So we'll include it as a referral letter from the Planning Commission, and we'll add those points.
Okay, thank you. I'll make note that Commissioner Hendricks has joined us at 7:15, and welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions for Ms. Schmidt? I've got one sort of comment that appreciating that we're all looking at this as an electronic copy. I want to just make sure that the final big map is included on any print copy that goes to council.
Yes.
I don't think it's part of the current electronic, nor does it need to be because we can blow it up, but at small scale, the part, as you know, parts of it are tricky enough to read
Yes,
as is.
absolutely.
Okay. Any remaining questions or comments? All right, if you'd stick close.
Yep, absolutely.
And what is the pleasure of the commission? I specifically brought up it looks like there's 16 questions on, depending on how you want to count the pages. If you're talking about the September 9 memo, it's page 8. It's page 85 of the document that we were all sent this evening. And it's just basically some things that I think probably wisely decided that it's really more council's jurisdiction to think about those things. But maybe if you take a look at them quickly, if there's anything where you think that some additional direction might be necessary or desired, I'm pretty comfortable with the way they look. I just want to make sure that that's not something that, when the meeting comes and they're finally asked for their input, I suspect that they'll ask, is there somebody, either staff or members of the committee or commission, that could provide at least a little bit of guidance here? So take a minute with that. I heard a voice. No, maybe I didn't.
Dan, I'll be honest with you. You mentioned having.
This is Commissioner Lapine.
Yes, that's me. Where's the document that you're alluding to with questions on it?
So the big packet we were.
Yep.
Yep. So so I've got 3 different page numbers.
Okay.
If you're looking at the September 9th, 2021 memo from Ms. Schmidt, that's page 85 of the big document.
Okay.
So that's the lower right-hand corner of what you're probably looking at.
Here we go.
All right?
Yep.
And it's actually 84 and 85. Again, if you've taken a look at this and it didn't strike you as something that needs additional input, I'm comfortable with that. I just want to make sure that, knowing full well that council will have questions, or I expect they will, if you would like to add additional direction or input at this time, now wouldn't be a bad idea. Vice Chair Boyle.
Yes, some of these are questions that were raised not by commission members, but raised during public comment. Others were more raised by commission members. I don't know if that makes any difference, but for example, the one about I wouldn't have any frontage, that was clearly somebody who was during public comment.
Absolutely.
Whereas some of the other questions that were raised, I think were raised in discussion, in commission discussions, and I'm not sure that there was any consensus by the commission regarding many of those questions. But I think it's important to include them there because that gets the council started on some of the crucial issues that need to be considered when they're looking at this very large, very new document.
Exactly. Yep.
So when I was going through it today, there were several areas that said City Planning Commission would like to keep it in the document for further consideration by the Planning Commission and the public. Would those be issues that you would like to include in this as well, and not just the last page, I believe, of the memo that lists things? It would be easy to pull out the things that were brought up by the public that really weren't questions of the Planning Commission, but staff can summarize them so they're clear, saying, for instance, I know there was a discussion about whether the 3-person per unit should be kept in. Items like that, that council or planning commission said that they would believe that that should be something that city council should weigh in on further. The alleys, even though we've changed that in the document, same thing. Though the planning commission took that out of the document, we want to make sure that council agrees that it should be encouraged, things of that nature.
Commissioner Wolf, then Vice Chair Boyle, then Commissioner Sullivan.
I was going to say much the same thing. In going through the first set of questions, I noticed quite a few that say they refer to getting an opinion from council. Things like the restriction, the minimum depth of an awning, for example, says that, and the requirement for a roof over a porch. And so when I look at the last 16, I feel as though those are missing from it. It seems though those should all be handled in the same way as the last 16.
Right. There's a lot within the body all the way through that has that type of statement.
Right. So I think it'd be good to combine those, or definitely call those out specifically to council.
Okay, thanks. Vice Chair.
I think actually I'm in agreement with Commissioner Wolf there. I think those things where earlier in the memo, it mentions that after some discussion, we felt that it should go to council in this way, but needs further discussion by council. I think it's good to flag all of those things in whatever document is going to accompany the
Right.
proposed plan when it goes to council.
So if we will include this memo, but if in the referral letter, I pulled all of that out and added it to the referral letter for emphasis, would that be appropriate?
I think it would be a good idea to have it in the referral letter.
Yes, I agree. Okay?
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, so I'm in agreement with those comments, and I think in particular, when we're looking at this list of topics that need city council direction, I'm glad that the 3 or fewer bedrooms topic was brought up, mostly because it's not controversial at all in the slightest. But also, I think, I think just a little clarity on exactly what we're asking council for here. So I'm not sure how we would phrase this one, but for example, I would maybe phrase this as seeking guidance from city council on potential flexibility of increasing the per bedrooms per unit, or something along those lines. Just, I think maybe it would even behoove us to go through this list and kind of just take another glance at all these items to see if we're on the right track, and maybe they're just frankly a little too ambiguous, and more comments than questions.
Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, I would say much the same thing. I did notice when going through this that the last 16 all read very differently than the material above it, and it's
Right.
a little bit disconcerting when you go through it and you don't realize immediately that those are quotes mostly taken from citizens.
Right.
Yeah, versus the planning commission discussion. If there's some way to clarify that, I guess. I'm not sure you really, well, I don't know if you need to reword what the citizens said to.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. Would it be more comfortable if I come up with this list and that you actually take action at the very next planning commission meeting? That way you have an opportunity to read the wording and make sure that you're comfortable with everything that was added?
I'm seeing a couple nods. Yeah, Commissioner Wolf, go ahead.
Well,
please.
I guess I would ask, would we, in some ways, I'd rather not hold up the process. If we
Okay.
generally
We can do it
approve
either
of
way.
this, I guess it depends on how quickly you think city council is going to, you would get it to city council and they would deal with it.
Well-
If that would happen soon, I guess I would try to get it done
Yeah.
soon.
What we could do, and you would be counting on your chairperson to change any wordsmith that I did not get right. So we can do that. We can make the vote tonight of how you, if you want to send it forward to city council or not. And in the referral letter, I will draft the language. You can make sure you're comfortable with it, make any changes, make sure that we have everything that we need to have in there. Is that comfortable?
I would be comfortable with that.
I'm gonna look around again, I'm seeing you nods, and that suits me
Great.
as well. That's
All
fine.
right,
And that'll-
wonderful.
won't slow
We'll
things
do
up
that.
then. All right. Thank you. Any other comments or questions for staff? Commissioner Lapine, did you have your hand up, or were you pointing? Ah, thank you.
Sorry, I was trying to help.
You are helpful. And so now hands are down again. I'll start, Commissioner Sullivan. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess just a point of clarification. Are we going to go through these tonight at all? Are we going to discuss these? Are there any of these items that need to be clarified? I guess, is staff comfortable with the current wording? And I don't know, I guess I wouldn't mind going through these at least quickly.
That's absolutely fine. It's just that, I think that the bright line right now is that everything that's sort of the 16, as we've been calling them, those came from the public, as opposed to questions that were either raised by the committee or the commission as a whole. Do we want to take a minute and just flip through them quickly?
That's
That's
completely
all
up
right.
to the planning commission.
I suppose so. Was there anything in particular that stuck out to you when you were reviewing it, Commissioner Sullivan?
I don't know. It's been a while since we've looked at a lot of these, but I think in particular the first one and just the how that's phrased, and I'm not entirely sure what a lot of these questions are asking as well. But I don't know. I could see what you could put forward, and I guess maybe.
And
we
I'd be
can-
happy to, exactly,
Yeah.
I'll review it with that in mind. I think ultimately it carries my signature, does it not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks. Commissioner Wolf, did you have another?
No. I would say that I'm comfortable going ahead with it. I mean, we did discuss all of these already, and I think it's ready to go. So actually, I did have a question of what type of motion are we expecting here? Just to approve?
The
this-
motion would be to either recommend that the document be forwarded to city council for consideration of how the document should be used going forward, or not forwarding it to city council at this time.
Okay.
Commissioner Wolf?
I will move that we forward the draft Shaping the Avenue document along with the list of topics to be further, that need further consideration to the city council for their consideration.
It's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Commissioner Lapine. Is there any discussion on that motion?
I'll say
Commissioner Wolf, thanks.
it's very nice to have finally gotten to this step in the process. Obviously, we still have a ways to go, but I think it's been 3 years since we had our first meeting, almost 3 years now, so.
Indeed. Any other discussion? All right, then, let's have a vote. All those in favor of the motion to forward the draft Shaping the Avenue document and the topics for consideration to City Council, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much. Well done, folks. That will bring us on to item 8, our new business for the evening, review of the joint work session follow-up, and housing study next steps. And this is Mr. Menzer. You can find this on page 86 through 88 in tonight's packet.
Greetings all.
Good evening.
I'm going to attempt to do this from the dais here, if I can see everything. You'll be focusing partly on that because I do have a presentation to provide. So, well, thanks for everyone's attention tonight, and thank you certainly for your attendance at the September 22 joint work session that we held with the Housing Commission. Hoping to get some feedback on that tonight, but my initial feedback is I thought it went really well, and it was a great opportunity to get everyone together and discuss some very important issues that the city is going to be considering over the next year or so. And I think this is a perfect complement to the previous discussion on shaping the avenue, because certainly that's going to play a role in some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. So what I'd like to do to start with is just, I guess, direct your attention to the near-term housing action plan that's in your meeting packet. Hopefully you all have that somewhat accessible. I'm going to go through a few of those items for further, in further detail here in just a minute. Rebecca, would you mind putting the presentation on screen? I recently learned how to do a lot of graphics in PowerPoint, so you're going to see a lot of fun things here, and a lot of it's just my tinkering. So I'll run through this, and we'll certainly have plenty of time to follow up on any items that need to do that. So again, this is the first part of this is just getting some feedback and follow up and trying to spur some discussion on that joint work session. So like I said, I thought it went really well, and I'm hoping that some of you would be willing to share some comments since that time. If you're anything like me, you attend an event like that and probably had a thought later that evening or maybe the next morning or later in the week. And if there was anything that came up that you're willing to share with staff, or there's something that we wanted to expand on, please let me know or discuss amongst yourselves. But I just wanted to at least provide this opportunity if necessary.
Right now?
Sure, if you can. If you
Any questions regarding this document or comments for Mr. Menzer? Yeah, Vice Chair Boyle.
I don't know if this is directly regarding this document, but I was thinking, having read the article in the State Journal on Sunday about housing in East Lansing, I was thinking one of the issues with diversifying housing in East Lansing is the affordability of housing for non-students. I know that when I moved here in '85 with a new job in Lansing, and I was looking to rent housing, East Lansing rental housing was beyond the scope of my budget due to the fact that students pay per person, and usually that makes small houses very expensive. And that caused me to wonder if during the study the consulting firm did any testing of what some of these potential housing diversification groups were willing to pay for housing. Because if they're not willing to pay something that is going to spur a developer to build housing, it's going to be really hard to diversify housing. And it would basically limit us to income qualified would be the only way we could do it. So I guess my question is, did they do, when they were questioning people, did they do any studies as to what would be a reasonable amount to pay?
I do not believe so. I will certainly follow up on that and bring it to you at a future meeting.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Menzer? I think the one question that was actually, I think, Commissioner, if you don't mind, Commissioner Wolf raised it at the meeting was on item 1, and I think the implication that the Shaping the Avenue document is going to be potentially incorporated, at least portions of it would be incorporated sooner than perhaps the overall, the entire master document was going to be incorporated, and potentially that the master document might not, I mean, of course, it's ultimately council's decision, but that ultimately the master document might only be used as a sort of a springboard for different ideas that might be brought forward by, it looks like, community and economic development and planning and zoning.
That certainly is something we want to prepare for. And I'm going to touch on that in a second in the
Okay.
presentation here, but I've worked on shaping the avenue in an adjacent municipality, and as you all know, you've worked on it for a long time. It's a big document, and there's a lot of implications for a lot of things, just to be very generic in the context there. So what I am hoping that the Planning Commission can do, and what the community may consider, is absent a full adoption, some sort of phased implementation, or at least consideration of adopting the principles and the shape of the avenue in other areas of the. So I wanted to prepare for that kind of alternative, just as this goes on, not knowing the future of that document, and not wanting to lose the momentum on the project, but also lose any of the input and the time that everyone has spent on this. So that's a good segue. If you don't
That-
mind, I'll go right
absolutely.
into it. And sorry for the awkward transitions, asking for feedback in the middle of the presentation, but so I just wanted to at least provide this. So what I'd like to do now, so there are a total of 7 of these, of 7 goals in the near-term housing action plan. What came out of the joint meeting were, I believe, 4 of them that were really, so let me step back, but in the action plan, really, there are some of the goals that are really designed for discussion at the Housing Commission. They're related to, for example, talking to realtors, developer stakeholders, homeowner assistance program, rehab programs, and some of these other categories that seem to fit more kind of in the realm of the Housing Commission, exclusionary housing requirements, MISHDA, low-income tax credit programs, that kind of thing. But several of them fit really well into the scope of what the Planning Commission works on at every meeting. So what I've done here, and this is a follow-up of the meeting, I guess I'm not prescribing this to you, but this seemed to what I felt and what our team felt came out of it, were a couple of the goals that really meshed well with the Planning Commission's vision. So one of them was Goal 1, and this is the one that Chairman Bowman just mentioned, the near-term, it's adding elements to the zoning code to allow a step down of density primarily north of downtown as envisioned in the master plan. So I don't have anything to show you on this tonight, and that's why I guess would caution anyone that's here tonight or watching at home that this is very preliminary discussion. This is just kind of a review of the items that were discussed at the meeting, and then just some very general ideas about how we may progress through this process. So the strategies identified in Goal 1 were revisiting the master plan, the future land use map, and determining feasibility of an overlay, zoning overlay implementation. So what I've done is just come up, and not alone, but our team has talked about, and you'll see for each of these, how do we get there? What are some things that we need to consider moving forward? So one of them is defining the project area. So we're talking about the area north of downtown. What literally is that? Where is the best place to possibly implement a district? And that's going to take a lot of work on our end. So reviewing the zoning map, the existing land use that's in the area, and certainly the future land use map are important components of that. As is developing a framework for community input. You have to, as I'm sure you've all learned in many different ways, you definitely have to have a plan for how you're going to go about getting input. It's not just having one community forum, and you might not capture everyone, so we really need to be deliberate and strategic about how we get input from a lot of different stakeholders, and that's certainly one of the challenges here. But engaging with adjacent neighborhoods is certainly way up on that list. So how we do that, and how the myriad of different ways that happens is something I think we need to work on a plan to do. And then certainly drafting ordinance language. So applying the standards from Shaping the Avenue into what possibly may be a pared down version focused on a specific geographic area. Obviously the Shaping the Avenue is a vast document, and there are certain things will fit into some areas better than others, but identifying what that would be and then actually coming up with a framework for an ordinance language would certainly get us at least starting down the right path. So one of the other goals that fit Planning Commission was Goal 4. That was a review of our northern tier. And certainly I've lived in the area, but as a new East Lansing person, the northern tier area north of Saginaw Highway, near our borders with Bath Township. But the review of that area of the future land use map to determine if further study of any area is needed from a housing perspective. So the strategies identified in the plan were revisiting, the action plan, revisiting the commercial future land use map categories. Most of the land in that general area is identified as C2 and C3. and ultimately trying to determine the feasibility of residential and/or mixed-use development in those areas. So how might we go about accomplishing this goal? Certainly a review of our zoning in that area, a review of existing land use, and a review of the future land use map is prudent. Determining community interest. Just generally, is housing palatable in that area? Are there good properties that might be developed as housing? Is that even something that is something we should consider? Identifying potential developable land. There's only so much area in the city that's developable, and certainly redevelopment is much more likely. Calculating potential build-out capacity, and this goes hand in hand with examining our utility capacity. So there obviously are going to be some limiting factors along the way. Utility capacity is one of them that is identified, and we'll get experts here to tell us about that in the future. I do not know all the details on that. But I think just looking at the general framework in the northern tier, what could we do, what do we want to do there, what could we do there, and what might help or stop us from looking at that area. Again, not prescribing any specific plan of action here.
Mr. Menzer?
Yeah,
Do
yes,
you
sir.
want to take questions as, point by point, or would you rather wait till the end?
It's up to you.
That's
Yeah.
up to you.
I got 3 more slides.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'll go
So
quick.
then, that's fine, yep.
Okay, thanks. So goal number 5 was one of the other ones that was identified for the Planning Commission. So this was a review of single and multiple family zoning districts that consider any changes necessary to make the districts and the ordinances that enable those districts more effective in allowing desired housing types. That was a big focus of the housing study. It's not just about housings, it's about the structures themselves and the amenity and related amenities. So strategies identified in the plan, we're reviewing our PUD ordinance and the zoning district regulations to determine if changes are needed. But that's always a good goal to have in mind here. But also reviewing minimum area and other requirements for cluster development plan and our neo-traditional neighborhood redevelopment plan ordinances. Those are 2 other types of ordinances, ultimately determining if changes are needed. For example, one of those, I believe it's the PUD ordinance, and I'm slowly immersing myself in all the ordinances. I don't have everything by heart yet, but it has a minimum size of 5 acres. Is that prudent? Are we going to get projects using that ordinance? And you'll see here how do we get there? We need to examine those provisions, really dig in on the current ordinances to determine if changes are needed. One of the best ways I like to do that, and I think is a good starting point, is looking at the projects that were developed using those ordinances. Did it get what you expected? Did it get what you desired or what the community needs? Certainly not a one-to-one comparison all the time, but it's a great place to start. And then identify best practices looking at other communities. We're not unique in Michigan or in the country, so there are a lot of different examples of these, certainly plan unit development ordinances or those types of cluster development ordinances that are out there. What are things that work, what don't work, what kind of things can we steal and adopt and use here? And then identifying potential amendments for council consideration. So if we were to go through, just like you've done with the Shaping the Avenue, and red line a draft of one of those ordinances and raise up the flagpole to council and get some direction, and ultimately, maybe an amendment would be initiated to go through the public process so we ultimately could make some changes. Finally, and this is just so those were the main goals that were identified in the near-term action plan as really falling into the Planning Commission's world. And if you'll remember, I should have said earlier, the action plan was really the boiled down version of the much longer strategic plan that had a lot of other information in it. But this was our attempt to really boil it down. If you watched the council meeting earlier this week, I think we got some good support from council and just generally heading in the right direction. So what they did was they looked at the near-term action plan and said, yes, these are generally the direction we think that we need to go. And so I took that as a let's run with it for now direction. The other items, and this is part of another goal in the plan, was accessory dwelling units. And you heard a member of our city mention this earlier. A lot of communities it's a complicated topic, but I think it's something that's worth considering. It was identified in the plan as one potential way to address housing issues. So it wouldn't work necessarily every property in the city, but something certain to consider. And then I just have the generic kind of others if there are other ways that you think we should be tackling this large, complex socioeconomic issue. So with that, I am done with this part and willing to answer any questions or anything you might have for me.
Questions for Mr. Menzer? Peter, could you pull up your slides again? Sorry. There was one, I think it was topic number 4, and I didn't make good notes, I'm afraid, to ask you the question about it, so. Oh, that was it. Now I remember what the topic was. I'm not necessarily bothered by this, but given that the C2 and the C3 districts were established during or established as part of the comprehensive plan, and we know, well, I know you weren't here, but you know how much time is usually taken up in preparing something like that. And here we are, I don't know, 3 years into this plan, and now we're talking about making not insignificant changes to that. Now, clearly, we've got to be able to, adjust our sails to the wind. I guess it's not. I don't know that it's so much of a concern for me. If it's the right thing to do, then it's the right thing to do. But that strikes me as something that we'd probably have to have a really good reason why we would turn around on again something that was put together over thousands of years, thousands of hours of it seemed like thousands of years when it was in process of community time in putting together that document. Again, I'm not saying that I object to that, but it is something that I think that's probably some caution. I think that, again, I'm putting words into Commissioner Wolf's mouth again, the way that I think that those areas were envisioned, that it was going to be sort of clustered development of potentially commercial buildings or commercial properties that would have sort of symbiotic relationships and sort of support one another. And this is in as much as there could potentially be mixed uses there, we're really talking about trying to find places for people to live, and less about the potential commercial uses there. Not an objection, just I guess a question or a comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Commissioner Wolf?
I guess I'm a little unsure of just what we're trying to do with this tonight. If we take these up at a later time and start talking about the actual details of doing them, do we want to do them, how are we going to do them, I think I will have a lot of comments. I'm not sure if we start delving into those details right now, it seems a little out of place. So that's partly why I'm not really saying anything here. What are we trying to do tonight?
Yeah, thank you. And I could have been more clear on that. I'm not asking for anything tonight. What I wanted to do was kind of follow up on that meeting that we held a couple weeks ago, or a few weeks ago at this point, and try to keep up that momentum, get these overarching goals in front of you to get some initial feedback. And I understand that these are very complex issues, and I don't expect anyone to have any detailed comments at this point, but at least kind of maybe some feedback on at least general direction. We're looking to tackle these. I was envisioning really kind of just starting at the top with and especially with the Shaping the Avenue discussion here, but defining, maybe we start looking at a project area for an overlay zoning district. And just start tackling them. I think that's ultimately what this group is for. So over a series of meetings, bring one to the group and we can flesh it out, identify some action items that need to come from that, and keep moving through the list.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, I'm not sure if these are comments or questions, but on item 4 specifically, this might be something that you're going to consider, but I just wonder what the overall impact of the Coleman Road extension is going to have on overall development in that area. I'm wondering if we're going to be looking at things like traffic patterns and developments across the boundary into other municipalities. Additionally, I guess something that just came to mind recently, now that we're talking about the northern tier, we recently heard a proposal for an extended stay hotel up in that area. Did the housing study at all look at any impact on hotels or any sort of extended stay type things on housing in the region? I'm wondering what impact that would have on apartments, for example.
I don't think it did, but let me double check and I can follow up with you on that one.
Thank you.
Are you looking at that right now? You're making notes yourself?
I'm
to
making
check
notes,
later?
yes.
Okay, good. Vice Chair Boyle?
I'm wondering if number 4, review of the northern tier areas of the future land use map, if maybe what you're suggesting is that we review the northern tier areas of future land use to make sure that all potential housing areas are being considered. Instead of targeting what we've already said should be commercial and say, let's reconsider that. Let's look at the whole northern tier with the idea of housing and see if we want to make any changes.
That's what I'm suggesting. It's
Uh-huh.
really kind of reshaping some of the questions and discussions that have already happened through the housing lens specifically to see if there are any changes. And that we very well may come to the end of some of these and say, we're happy with what the designation is now and don't need to change it. But the idea is at least to kind of vet these ideas since they were the culmination of a lot of discussion related to the housing study.
If you're looking for some feedback on item number 1, and I know you're fully aware of this, so it's not telling you anything, but that this body considered a potential dialing back of the scope of the Shaping the Avenue ordinance from the, I'll call it the difference between the commercial or mixed-use group and the more residential group. And actually, I think we actually effectively embraced it for quite some time, and then near the end of our discussion, we decided that it kind of had to be, both parts needed to be in place for it to proceed. Now, I appreciate that, ultimately that, again, that's council's decision, and that it might very well be that some, not only a hybrid, but significantly scaled down version of you're looking, I think one of your, and it's not on here, it was on one of your slides, talked about, sort of determine what the boundary is. And I'm not saying that there's a boundary in place. I would submit to you that there is currently a proposed boundary, and there's even a dialed back boundary that again, the committee and this commission decided that we didn't want to pursue. Again, it's just another option that you're offering, but I know you're aware that there is a boundary, a recommended boundary in place already, and that the scaled back version of that did not meet favorably with the committee or the commission, knowing full well that there might be, different direction that's going to come forward from that.
Thank you.
Sure. Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, along those lines, I would mention that we also spent quite a bit of time talking about implementing the full Shaping the Avenue as an overlay. When it was originally proposed, as I recall, it actually came in with that as a recommendation, and we dismissed that pretty quickly and decided that that was going to complicate the code too much, making it very difficult to have to look in multiple places to find out exactly what applies in any particular location in the city. And I'm still skeptical about adding more overlays. I think we have a few too many already. We have, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 different overlays that I can think of.
So if it works for the commission, what I guess I can work with the chair to schedule some times where we could bring some of these issues back at a one at a time, a little easier to swallow, and we can have a more detailed discussion, and I can provide some additional information outside of just an overview. So tonight was really just intended to get the ball rolling on direction.
I've got one more comment. I know you didn't quite, you specifically talked to us about 1, 4, and 5, but then you talk about accessory or auxiliary dwelling units, which is under item 6, and I think you're right that the way that it's written here, it's probably more appropriate to be handled by the Housing Commission. But just before the meeting, Vice Chair Boyle and Commissioner Wolf and I were talking about the New York Times article this weekend about San Diego and what's going on in California, and specifically having to do with auxiliary dwelling units. And it seems to me that that's sort of a potential planning tool that, I know your feelings about this too, so I presume you're comfortable with bringing that. That's something I think that this body should be considering, perhaps not in terms of the sort of the unit itself, but is that something that's manageable in terms of, how do you do it, right? Do you have to split the lot off? Is it something where currently zoning doesn't permit it to having two, I call them principal uses on one lot? And if you could do that, is that something where if somebody's really looking for ownership, are they really interested in actually sort of owning a piece of property or a building on a piece of land that somebody else owns? So I think that there's planning ramifications in that, in that particular building type. Again, I don't know that it fits with, again, it seems to me that item 6 is really more housing stuff, but.
I was
think that's something
envisioning, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's just something that I think that, it's a very, and it's a very hot topic right now. I think that's something that we should probably be taking into consideration, yeah.
Oh, well, did you have something?
Ms. Schmidt?
One thing that I just want to bring up, what we did with Avondale Square to test it was that owner-occupied units could have an accessory dwelling. And you had to have
Didn't know that.
owner-occupied
Yeah.
in order to have it. So, I mean, that's a method, especially starting from the get-go. The ordinance could address it, that it could only be owner-occupied, and it would be deed restricted.
Sure, and that auxiliary unit could be available for rent?
It could be
Right.
available
But the
for
idea
rent,
that-
but the main structure has to be owner-occupied.
Sure.
And that's a good method to do that, especially with a community that's concerned about that issue.
Yeah. Thank you. Commissioner Wolf?
I just want to confirm what I think you just said, which is that we should certainly be involved in number 6 as far as the code goes, as to how that might be implemented. It's obviously important what developers might be interested in doing and things like that, but there's very definitely a zoning issue there.
Yeah, absolutely. I was envisioning the planning commission being the how, and maybe the housing commission being the why.
Or what? Yeah, sorry, I was really going back to the main topic, that consider policies promoting diversified housing types. I don't really know that that's our,
Right.
charge, though we certainly have opinions on them, I suspect.
But the code, right before that, it mentions the code,
There you go.
which is the part that would apply to us.
Yes, we would definitely have to make some changes to the code to.
Oh, yeah. All right, any other questions or comments from Mr. Menzer? All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time, and I hope this was worthwhile, and this is really kind of just the beginning of where this goes from here. I realize it's very hard to emote with a mask, so I have been smiling. I've been smiling up here. You just couldn't see it. Thank you.
All right, then. Any other final comments before Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm glad that we are responding relatively quickly to the housing study. This isn't necessarily the main thing. A lot of what drove our request for the housing study was student housing, the boom in that. This is a somewhat unexpected result, and I'm glad that we are moving ahead to deal with these issues.
Absolutely. That actually brings us on to item 9, Commissioner concerns, or just perhaps comments, if anybody has anything they'd like to raise. Look one more time. All right, then. I'm seeing no hands, and that would mean that a motion for adjournment would be in order.
Move to adjourn.
I see Commissioner Cahill's hand. Is there a second? And Commissioner Williams, thank you. No need to discuss that. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed? That motion carries. We are adjourned. I'm going to say it straight up, 8 o'clock. Well done, everybody. And thank you for your time. Stay safe.